Hello and welcome back to the Business of Story. If this is your first time here, I'm Park Howell and I'm so glad you're joining us because today you will learn the presentation secrets from a TEDx creator who has helped over 100 people supercharge their personal and professional brands with viral presentations. But you might be thinking, Park, I'm not planning to do a TEDx talk anytime soon. Is this episode really for me? Well, if you ever find yourself in front of an audience of 1 or 1,000, then the presentation storytelling tips and tricks you'll learn today will help you make an impact with your message and who knows, maybe even go viral with your vision. Do you remember your very first speaking gig? I sure do. It was an unnerving moment in the 4th grade that I thought doomed me to public speaking for the rest of my life simply because I ruined Christmas for everyone. And it all went down at that annual tradition of the elementary school Christmas pageant. I was asked to speak the very first time in the public eye, and I can recall shuffling across that stage, and the first thing that came to me was this microphone. It greeted me like an angry goose craning its head from atop the wood podium. Beyond it, stark silhouettes of parents, hundreds of them, stared at me in the dark and sweaty St. Brendan's gymnasium. I sensed they were eager to watch their particular student play their part in the annual Christmas pageant, and that I was just another speed bump in the production. Poised on the stage behind me were the popular 8th graders playing Joseph, Mary, and the Wise Men, with some younger kids dressed as livestock. They preened over a plastic baby Jesus in swaddling clothes. All I had to do was deliver 3 short lines, my 30 seconds of anointed fame. It was going to be great because I had rehearsed relentlessly all week. Well, the spotlight hit me like headlights on a mule. I froze. My hands began to tremble. My froggy voice withered in my parched throat. I pressed my internal mute button. The entire gym was a still life of anticipation, witnessing me quietly implode. Somewhere out in the crowd, a man cleared his throat to prod me along. I looked down at my notes to gather myself when it happened. An involuntary "sheesh" curled out of me and into the microphone. The audience, to my regret, had heard something entirely different. Following a pause as pregnant as Mary had been, they spontaneously combusted into uproarious laughter. My mind raced. What had I just said? What did they think I had just said? I turned to the manger players with my palms raised in a look of what? Their mouths hung open and their brows drawbridged above eyes that asked, did he just say what I think he just said? Then it hit me. I had choked in the most important show of the year before God and everyone. And if that wasn't enough humiliation, I had frankincenced my collapse with the most inappropriate exclamation ever. My sneakers made a hasty retreat stage right, and thankfully, I was in them. Tears erupted from me. I was mortified, thinking I had ruined the entire holiday season for all. I swore off public speaking and to never again place myself in such a precarious, humiliating position before God and everyone. But life is funny. It turns out that I was a hit, the most memorable part of the show, people still tell me. Looking back at that moment, and to many like it throughout my career, I have learned that the most captivating stories are about what we must overcome to achieve any modicum of success. Ironically, now I find myself on stage all the time, helping people and their teams craft and tell compelling stories to nudge the world in any direction they choose. I've even done a TEDx talk about looking for the scenes in your life that have really informed who you are today. When you look for those scenes, your story will find you, kind of like this particular scene in the St. Brendan's gym. The bit of hell I went through during that Christmas pageant was, in hindsight, the birth of my speaking career. Who knew? Well, I guess someone did. That's why I'm excited to have on today's show Ashley Stahl, who is an expert at developing your personal brand story and growing your business through what she calls the super highway to success. And that's sharing your story in a signature TEDx presentation.
That's what's so funny, I think, about good speech writing is that the opener is really like a top hat. It doesn't have to do with anything. It doesn't need to have to do with anything that you're about to talk about. A good speechwriter can weave that and make sense of that. So the bridge that I drew there was that as I went to bed at that night, I wondered, how could anybody do something like this? And I was thinking, like, we often kidnap ourselves and put ourselves in lives we really don't want and careers we really don't want. And I was thinking about, how could these kidnappers choose a career path like this? Like, do something to people like this. And that fed into, now let's talk about your career path and how you are your own kidnapper and taking yourself out.
Ashley Stahl started her career in counterterrorism, of all things, at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and has since become a career expert, author, podcaster, and speaker. She is the author of the international best-selling book, U-Turn, that's Y-O-U, Turn, and a top 100 TEDx speaker. She has been featured in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, on The Steve Harvey Show, and in so many more prominent places. Ashley knows that a lot of people think that you got to go out and pitch your butt off to get into national TV shows or being accepted into Forbes columns and entrepreneur magazines and all of those high visibility places. Let's face it, personal branding can be a hamster wheel of anxiety, frustration, and exhaustion. But Ashley has found a way to make TEDx talks a launchpad to 10x any career. She has coached and booked 100 plus entrepreneurs to create and book their own TEDx talks in order to skyrocket their personal brands. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Ashley Stahl. Hello, Ashley. Welcome to the Business of Story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, great having you here. Now, one of the fascinating things I've got to hear the backstory on, really counter-terrorism?
I know. Not a conventional career path selection.
How'd that all come about?
You know, I grew up in a house where the news was always on. My dad had, my mom's side of the family was the opposite side of the political aisle from my dad. So it was like every part of politics was represented. Every Sunday at dinner, people would get into it. And I kind of formed an opinion about it, for better or for worse. So sorry, the gardener is passing my window.
That's good. We're like NPR here. We love ambient sound.
So yeah, every single day at the table, it was kind of like I formed an opinion, for better or for worse, every single Sunday. And I always knew I was really good at learning foreign languages. That was a knack for me as a kid. I spoke Spanish fluently. I learned French very quickly in middle school. And by the time I got to college, everybody was asking me the "what do you want to be when you grow up" sort of question. And it's interesting looking back, because at 18 years old, how are we supposed to really know who we want to be when our brain isn't even done forming until we're 26, according to the research? So, I remember thinking, well, I'm good at languages and I've got a knack for it. I might as well, try to help the world in some way. And I've always been a helper and a protector. I've always been, to a fault, a bit of a rule follower. Like, if you put me on an airplane and I have a middle seat and nobody shows up for the flight, I will stay seated in my middle seat. Like, I like to respect the rules. I don't know. And so going into the government kind of felt like a way to honor these parts of my personality. And when 9/11 happened, I think a lot of people remember where they were standing. I remember standing in high school, watching the towers go down and thinking like my language skills could be of help. So I poured everything into that career. I, you know, did the internships and ended up at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And the through line of it all is, I was able to, in the middle of the recession, get 3 job offers. And that put me on a trajectory of creating an online platform, becoming a career coach for 15 years, leaving the Pentagon. But the through line of all of it was knowing how to communicate. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because we often misunderstand our skill set. Like, I always knew I was a really good writer. And even the opening of my book, U-Turn, the opening page talks about my preschool graduation. The principal told the kids that we need to go up and say what we wanted to be when we grow up on stage in front of the parents. I remember I said, I want to be a mom and I want to be a poet. And I kind of deviated
In
from
that
that.
order?
Yeah, in that order. And it's funny, the things we know when we're little kids, and then I deviated away from that and went into national security. And I kind of misunderstood my skill set in national security because I remember in the job interviews thinking, oh, intelligence reports, I get to write. I'm a good writer. But it's like totally different side of your brain, like the creative side of your brain as a creative writer, the other side of your brain with analytical thinking, that's the kind of side of your brain you need to be involved in writing intelligence reports. So the amount of misunderstanding I had of myself in my early 20s is kind of understandable now that I realize like how much we really don't know when we're young. We know a lot and we know a little in other ways.
Mhm.
So I left national security and counterterrorism and created my coaching practice. And I got this TED talk because of my work in national security. I was like 24 and I got this award. My dad flew in to DC and he was so proud. And I remember the person that walked in, she was Miss Maryland, I think, like a pageant winner. And I was asking her why she got the same award I did, what she's up to. She said she'd just spoken at TEDx at the UN. And I said, "Oh, wow, that sounds amazing. Like, what was that like for you?" And she was like, "I bet you could do something like that." And I remember saying to her, "Oh, one day, like that's far out there." The next week, I went to Turkey for a work assignment. And funny enough, I get a text message from her when I'm in a protest in the middle of Istanbul on a work assignment. And she said, "I got you a TEDx talk." And I remember thinking, how does somebody even do that? And I got an email from TEDx Berkeley, and they invited me to speak. And they said, all we need is a speaking reel. And I had no idea what a speaking reel was. I Googled it and I propped my iPhone up against the bathroom mirror and of my motel in Istanbul. And I put the curtain of the bathroom behind me as a backdrop, the shower curtain. And I gave a speech thinking that could count as a speaking reel. It was like really horrendous. Like, I can't even believe I got this opportunity, but I ended up getting that TED talk and it ended up skyrocketing my career. I ended up getting a full coaching practice from that, tons of different opportunities, and it just changed everything. It made me in a position in my personal brand from pursuing things all the time to things coming to me. And that
Mhm.
change was so huge for me. And from there, as the years went on, I thought, well, I really need to redeem myself with myself because I've never given a speech in my life. And for the first one to be a TEDx talk, it was a good talk. It went viral, but it didn't really feel like me. So I ended up giving a second speech in 2019, and that one got almost 10 million views, went super viral. It's in the top 100 TEDx talks on the internet. And that one changed my career even more. It got me book deals. It tripled my keynote fees, got me 5 years as a spokesperson. And that was when I started this business and thought, I need to help people write and book TEDx talks. This changed my life, and I want to do the same for others.
All right. Now, I've got to use your own interview skills against you or on you to unpack all of that.
Yeah,
Number one, so this is going to be a lightning round of what you just told us. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Los Angeles.
Where did you go to college?
I went to university at King's College London.
King's College. Interesting. That's quite a. What did you study there that set you up to be a counter intelligence individual?
I was in the Department of War Studies at King's College London. I went on years later to get a master's in psychology at University of Santa Monica as well.
And this all stemmed from the 9/11 incident when you were a high schooler and you saw this and you thought, I'm really good at language skills. I can help.
Yep.
That was it. Okay, so then we fast forward. You're in Istanbul. Are you there in your counterintelligence role
Yes.
with the Pentagon? So
Yes.
you're there. They've got a big demonstration going on. You all have got eyes on the streets to figure out what's going on, and then you get this call that you could potentially do a TEDx. But then
Yeah.
you had to go into your never done a reel before, never done a speech before. It doesn't sound
No.
like,
In my
and
life.
you literally shot this in the bathroom with your iPhone with a crazy little shower curtain behind you as your backdrop. You sent that to TEDx and they said, yes, you're in.
You're in. Miracle. Yeah.
What was the first topic, that first TEDx topic that you spoke on?
The talk is about 3 questions to unlock your most authentic career path. And I went on stage after Guy Kawasaki.
Okay. And for those that don't know Guy Kawasaki, he's from Apple fame, from the early days of Apple fame, and he's done a lot of, he invented or created, founder of Canva and so many other things. So yeah, that's a pretty big name to follow. Why did you pick that topic for your very first TEDx talk?
I think TEDx talks are so powerful and they have so much that they can do to skyrocket your brand that I figured that I would make a talk not just about who I've been, but who I want to be. And who I wanted to be was a career coach, because working in the Pentagon, I realized number one, my communication skills weren't going to get me as far there. And I wanted to have a career that didn't feel hard, not because I'm afraid of a challenge, but because I want to be in the natural flow of who I am. And it just didn't feel like it was who I was there. And so I knew that I had inspiration. First of all, I knew that I had a lot of talent in getting job offers because I got so many of them during the recession. But number two, I wanted to use my skill set. And I figured the best way to do that to help other people would be to start a career coaching business. And obviously, being very young, I had no career to really coach off of. And so, kind of a joke to think of myself as a career coach at 24 years old. But I was really good at job searching. So I started a small job hunt coaching business. And because of that TEDx going live about career and figuring out your career, a lot of millennials, their parents came to find me and hire me to take care of their kid in their job search.
What were those 3 steps that you talked about in that first TEDx talk?
Yeah. The first question is, what am I good at? Like really helping people ask themselves that natural question. And this is the question I asked myself at the Pentagon. What am I good at? What is my gift? The second question is, what do people tell me I'm good at? I find far too often we're not paying attention to, we're so stuck in ourselves. We're not paying attention to feedback. And the thing about other people is that they are neutral observers. They have no skin in the game of our career. They're simply noticing where things are working for us and where they're not, especially colleagues at work. So I think the question, what do people tell me that I'm good at, is incredibly useful. Obviously, you need to trust your own intuition as a filter to decipher if you really agree that somebody's pointing to a gift that you have. And then the third question is, what's holding me back? And I talk about your thoughts and how your thoughts hold you back. And how do we rework our thoughts so that we can free ourselves? Because, the truth of the matter is there's somebody out there doing what you want to do. And there's just different thoughts going on in that person's head. They have the same qualifications that you do or don't have, and they're creating different results. So that third point of the talk was about your thinking. And I mean, looking back, I'm proud of the talk because my 23, 24-year-old self, it's like I was so young, I'd never spoken in my life. And so, but now I cringe watching it, because can you imagine your first try at giving a speech being all over the internet and going viral? It's like, ooh, grateful for the virality, but kind of scared that that's what shows the world me.
Okay, now why do you think they selected you? Obviously, they were intrigued by your background. You were referred in. Then they asked you for this speaker reel, which was shot hastily in in an Istanbul hotel. Was it the content? What was it you think that they said, yes, she's for us, even though you had never done this before in your life?
I think that what I love about the TED and TEDx brands is that they're really a democracy of ideas. They're not interested in just having famous people on stage. And that's why even my agency, when we write and book TEDx talks, people are come to us all the time and they say, "Am I established enough to be getting this?" And it's like, well, of course you are. Like everybody has a story. And so it's really a matter of how well can you tell your story in a way that provides value to other people. And I think that's where we come in as a speech writing house. And looking back on that first TEDx talk I gave, there was a guy that worked for Obama as one of his speech writers. And I remember going to him and saying, "Hey, I'm giving a talk and I've never done one. Do you have any tips?" He actually outlined, well, here's how we write for the president. Like, here's how we do an opener, and here's how we. And that formula, I would have never thought when I was 23, 24 years old that I would carry that with me. Now I'm almost 37 and I'm still using that. And it is the backbone of my speech writing house and what I'm teaching my speech writers. And I know you have your own method, but it's been, and I think your method kind of appears in mine in its own way.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Um,
let's talk about that method. That's
yeah,
interesting. I would like to know, what did that Obama speechwriter tell you
yeah,
that helped you and you use today?
yeah. Well, a lot of the first thing I learned, well, there's the method I learned then, and then there's what I know about virality now. And it's kind of like taking a look at both. So, what I know about things that go viral now is number one, titles, right? Like we know that nothing's going to go anywhere if nobody clicks it. And what gets them to click it is what it says. So, do you have a title? That's why with the TEDx clients we have coming in and out of our speech writing agency, we are very, we give a lot of feedback about title because some people want to be creative and silly and punchy about their title. I want to be tactical and strategic and SEO optimized about their title. What are people Googling at 3 a.m. and how can we make that your title? So the title is the first thing. The
So
second
let's
thing is,
real quick,
yeah,
let's talk about the title.
yeah.
What Give us some input. What makes a good title?
I think there's two different approaches. The first approach is straightforward, right? Like 5 reasons why you haven't, not 5 ways to fall in love. You know, that's like a straightforward title. 3 ways to be successful, how the most successful people create their habits, like whatever those, I'm just throwing from the hip here, but those are straightforward titles. The other one is the one that appears, for the monkey mind, which is the loophole, right? The secret to why marriages fail, what you don't know about making money, the reason the real reason you're sabotaging your success, right? These are loophole titles that leave you curious about what the answer is. So those are the two kind of approaches that we take to coming up with a title.
Cool, straightforward, and monkey mind loopholes. I love it. All right.
Yep. Yep.
Next up.
After the title, we look at the opener. So you can only spend so much of your TEDx talk opening up before you get into the meat of what you're really saying. And there's a few different types of openers. One is storytelling. And if you look at, eventually, I gave a second TEDx talk, like I mentioned in 2019. I think that one really shows my skills and it's ranked in the top 100 on the internet and it's done so much for my career. So that one really shows, I think, an opener that does good storytelling. It makes people feel a whole range of emotions. There's contrast in the emotions. There's hope, there's pain, there's fear, there's joy, there's sadness, there's relief. The second thing I think a good opener does in the storytelling is put people on the edge of their seat a little bit, get people curious. So one approach is just the storytelling opener. The second approach is the conversational opener. You see people do that all the time. They'll have a poll question like, do you just wish that you could blah, blah, blah? Do you struggle to da, da, da? Or they'll have a shocking statistic. They're opening up a conversation. The problem I have with that method is that it tends to be hard to keep going with because like if you drop a bomb in your first question and you get people's attention, you need to keep their attention from there. The rest of your conversation has to be interesting enough to keep their attention. And I think if you're not storytelling and you're starting with dropping a bomb, sometimes it's hard to stay conversational and keep their interest. The third is a combo. You drop a bomb, you drop a shocking stat, you open up with a big question, and then you back into a story. I personally go with the first one most often, just a very moving, deep story. And I've learned that powerful stories don't have to be, shocking stories. It doesn't, I had a client who had multiple car accidents and there were fatalities and he wasn't responsible for the accident. Like two drunk drivers hit him in his life. Both of them died and he survived. Not only did he survive, but both cars were totaled and he walked away unscathed. So there's crazy stories that we can open up with. But what I've learned is that it's the clients that have deeply vulnerable, relatable stories that actually move me more. And it's really changed the way that I view speech writing, because I originally thought, wow, the more crazy the story, the more attention I'm going to get. And that's what I want to do for our clients, because we're not just getting their talks written, we're getting them booked on stage for TEDx. So the curators that we are pitching their speech to, I want them to open it and immediately be interested. So the opener is not just
Mm-hmm.
important for virality, but for getting them booked on stage. And we have nearly 100% success getting people booked. So for us, this opener is the thing. And I've learned that the deeply vulnerable stories, it can be anything of like an embarrassing story growing up, like something that happened to you that, we actually had a really funny TEDx talk. We had a client who would go to saunas all the time. And or he never went to saunas, but he was in Amsterdam and everybody goes to saunas all the time. So he's kind of convinced to go. He wasn't feeling well. Everybody said, this is the perfect time for you to go to the saunas. It wasn't something he would typically do, but he thought, well, I'm going to do as the Dutch do and go to a sauna. He shows up, everybody's naked in the sauna, or he was told that everybody goes naked. So he's kind of like hyping himself up, like I'm gonna be naked like all the Dutch people that in the sauna are telling me I should be. He walks in, he whips his towel off, and everybody has a towel on except for him. So it's like embarrassing stories do really, really well. So that's just like another, angle
Yeah.
for that.
Okay, so let's go back. This was your 2019 TEDx talk that really blew you up. That was your
Yeah.
super highway TEDx
Yeah.
talk. What was its title?
How to figure out what you really want.
How to figure out what you really want. And what was your opening story?
I open up with my dad. You know what's funny about this, Park, is that it's not even my story, it's somebody else's story that I
Mm-hmm.
open up with, which is really interesting. People don't always think about that we can tell stories that aren't even our stories, but that are interesting to us. So I actually told a story about my dad in the kitchen getting a phone call from somebody who pretended that they'd kidnapped me. But the listener didn't know it was a pretend scam situation until a few minutes into the talk. So it opens up with my dad getting a phone call. Somebody's screaming on the other line, and a man is saying that he has kidnapped me and that he has his daughter.
And then what?
So from there, it goes on to, talk about how he was on this phone call and he was lured into transferring some of his life savings to quote unquote save me, like as if I was held hostage. Because I worked in national security and I had a personal brand, I get that he believed it, and he's older, so it was like really shocking for him, his system. He's very with it guy. So I imagine if this can happen to him, it could happen to anybody. But he literally made it to the Walmart parking lot, and he didn't even know if in his head if somebody was watching him. Like when he got this call, he even thought somebody's outside the house. Maybe like he felt so scared. He put on a napkin for my mom, like call 911, like somebody's on the phone saying they kidnapped her. And they drove to Walmart, and the kidnapper kept saying, is anybody with you? Like making sure. And it's all part of the scam. Like if somebody's with
So he
him,
was totally hoodwinked.
he was totally hoodwinked until the end. He didn't transfer money because somebody from the police department got on the phone with me and said, I'm with your dad and we're in the middle of a scam. And, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, what are you talking about? Am I okay? Of course I'm okay. And that was when he hung up the phone and did not transfer his life savings to these kidnappers.
Thank God. And how does that story connect? How'd you bring it full circle to the title of How to Figure Out What You Want?
That's what's so funny, I think, about good speech writing is that the opener is really like a top hat. It doesn't have to do with anything. It doesn't need to have to do with anything that you're about to talk about. A good speechwriter can weave that and make sense of that. So the bridge that I drew there was that as I went to bed at that night, I wondered, how could anybody do something like this? And I was thinking, like, we often kidnap ourselves and put ourselves in lives we really don't want and careers we really don't want. And I was thinking about, how could these kidnappers choose a career path like this? Like, do something to people like this. And that fed into, now let's talk about your career path and how you are your own kidnapper and
That's a
taking myself out.
that is a great thought. You're going through all that, like, how what do I want to do with my life? I think kidnapping. That
Yeah.
seems to make sense to me.
Yeah. It blows
I'd
my
never
mind.
considered that as a job, opportunity. So you've got your building on this virality. You've got your titles both straightforward, the 5 ways to do this and that and the other thing, or that loophole, the secret, what you don't know, and yours was how. I guess yours was a loophole title, how to figure out what you want, right?
Yeah.
Then you've got these openers, of course, storytelling. I'm a big believer in that. When I did my TEDx talk, I told a story about my mother, who was a nurse, for literally until she was about 85, and then she finally retired from volunteering as a nurse. And I asked her, "What made you want to be a nurse, Mom?" And it was when she was 4 years old and her sister was coming into the world, and she was waiting in the waiting room for her sister to be born, and a nice nurse walked in the white gowns of back then and pulled an orange out of her pocket and gave it to my mom. And my mom thought, wow, that stranger came out of nowhere. That was so nice. I want to be like that when I grow up. And she did it for the rest of her life. And then I never revealed it was my mother, of course, until the very end of the TED Talk. So I'm a big believer in that storytelling side of life. Didn't drop a big bomb in that case. It was more like, who is this person he's talking about?
Mm.
So you've got the title, you've got the opener, and then what?
So, I mean, it depends on timing, but like if I was writing a 30 to 45-minute keynote, I would never put more than 4 main points in it. So I think at the end of the opener, you kind of say, here's what I want to talk about today, and you share what your talking points are. Then you move into sharing your talking points. It's a pretty straightforward formula. What the speechwriter over with Obama kind of shared was just around signpost, which is really code for talking points, right? Signposts can be 3 key questions, 3 key mind shifts, 4 different ways to do something, 5 lessons you've learned. Like they're all signposts, and they're really designed to refocus the audience on new topics, pull them out of their iPhones if they're getting lost and they're lost in the sauce, and keep them focused and put structure to your talk. So we really have core signposts to make sure that was what the speech writing team taught me. Mostly they spent the most time talking about openers and inspiring people and messages in the opener. If there's anything I've learned about messaging, it's a lot of clients will come in and say, what is my message? How do I make sense of that? And I've learned that you don't really need to know what your message is at the beginning of a talk. And that's something that's kind of a controversial thought, I guess. I really like to know, what is the topic and what are the best things that person has to say about this topic. And then from there, I like to think about, well, what's the message I'm getting from all this, and how can we weave that in at the end and throughout the talk as kind of like a fairy dust. I think sometimes people focus too much on elements of a speech that get them so distracted, it makes it harder for them to actually bring out their best. I think one thing people get distracted with TEDx, for example, is they get incredibly distracted by the idea that they need one idea worth spreading. In reality, TEDx lives on YouTube. So it's not just a TEDx talk, it's a YouTube video. It's a YouTube talk. YouTube owns the house. TEDx is like a bouncer at the door, right? So the way I look at these talks when clients come in to get written and booked is, I think, how do we please the bouncer at the door? But how do we get your best so that the owner of the house is the happiest? Because YouTube's what makes you go viral, not TEDx, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking to myself that was the direction to go. And so whenever a client comes in, and they're like, I don't know what my one big idea is, I always tell them, we'll get to that later. All I really want to know is what topic is most important you talk about for your career, for your business, for your positioning as a professional. And, like today we had a dentist, and she wants to talk about oral health and how much what's going on in your mouth is influencing your entire body. It's like the gateway for your health. So I'm like, great, the topic is oral health. From there, it's easy to come up with a story. But my bigger question is, what are the most innovative, original important things you have to say about oral health? And can I pull my signposts out from there?
And that's an interesting topic. Did you arrive at that yet, or did you send her away and she's thinking about that? Because I'm kind of curious what the answer is. How do you
Yeah.
make that interesting, or what is innovative about oral health?
Yeah, I mean, it could be any health professional. We've about a third of our clients are doctors, psychiatrists, mental health professionals of sorts. Another third are like corporate executives. But for the health people, usually what they're doing is really important. And they have to remember that the average viewer of a TEDx talk, we have to write at a fifth grade reading level tops. And so in that case, a lot of the times the first talking point writes itself because it's about asking yourself, like, what even is this, right? So the first talking point for the dentist is really what's going on in your mouth and why does it matter for you? And so we're going to talk about how the mouth is like a whole ecosystem. There's like a jungle going on in there. And
Right.
we're going to paint a picture of that to educate people on why does it even matter that they care about this? What's going on in there? So that's the first talking point. Usually we write a full TEDx talk for somebody in 4 Zoom calls, and that was just the first Zoom call. And so usually, the first Zoom call, we don't usually brainstorm the whole talk as much as just the start.
Mm-hmm. And then how do you go about getting these people booked? So you must
Yeah,
have a lot of connections with a lot of TEDx producers around the
we
country,
do.
around the world. They know that you deliver good talent with great scripts. I mean, what's it take to get booked?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, I'm not in charge of booking because I wouldn't know what I'm really doing, but I do understand a couple of things about it. Our team has booked over 1,200 TEDx talks for clients all over the world. And we do have a lot of relationships with TEDx curators, but most of the talks are booked, but not by people we have a relationship with, but by people who are impressed with the speech. So I think the first thing is like, what entrepreneur is going to write a talk when they don't have that talk booked? It's kind of counterintuitive. So it's a little bit of a chicken or egg, but I do think it helps to have your talk written so that you could share it
So
and show
you
it
do
to them.
that first, and
We do
then
that first.
you shop that talk around.
Correct. Correct.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Do you have people that come to you, and do you use the same framework you use for TEDx's, where they're saying, "Ashley, I need help with a sales presentation"? Does that framework work for that sort of audience, or is it just the theater of TEDx that you're really focused on?
We're just focused on TEDx right now, but we have had a lot of clients whose talks have gone viral. And not only, and before that even happened, they were like, "We're holding on to your ankles. What else can you write for us?" And I have to say, the talent that I have on my team has been one of the biggest challenges and blessings because I had a ghostwriting house for 15 years and I'd probably gone through about 2,000 different applications and speaking, writing samples to, get to my team of like 8 or 10 ghostwriters. I pulled my 2 best ones over when I started my Wise Whisper agency. So the reason that matters is because, when you really take a look at it, a third of our clients are, New York Times bestselling authors or, you know, doctors, heads of surgeries that haven't created their personal brand yet. A lot of these writers, they have a higher standard for writers. So we're not just giving them good writing, we're giving New York Times level writers, people that are more visionary than them as writers for their
Mm-hmm.
speeches. So the standard of talent has limited me in the sense where I don't want to tie up my talent on other things. I just want to stick with our bread and butter. We do offer to clients, once they do a TEDx with us, speaking reels and social media management, and we upgrade their TEDx into keynotes and things like that, but we just don't offer that publicly. That's just things that we also have had a couple clients ask us to write webinar scripts because they're selling a product to their audience and they feel so seen by us, like we've gotten to know them so intimately that we can kind of infuse the spirit of that into their video sales letters and webinars. So that has happened.
Okay. I want to go back to this idea of virality, because there are so many TEDx talks out there and TED Talks and just so much noise online. I want to know the virality that you get. How much of it is the actual content and presentation? How much of it is the marketing and SEO that you built into it? And how much of that virality is just pure luck?
Mm, I think it's 50-50 because most of the talks we've written that have gone viral, I knew they would. Like, I knew mine would go viral, the one I gave in 2019, and it didn't go viral for 6 months. It sat dead in the internet, in the corner of the internet. Nobody watched it really. And I would go to my friends and say, "That's so weird. It hasn't gone viral yet. That's so weird to me." Because it wasn't an ego thing. It was like a creative knowing. And so I do think what comes up for me when I feel like it's going to go viral is I'm incredibly moved. Like, I feel a lot and then if I believe the speaker has good presentation skills, because it's part of it's having good content, part of it's being an excellent presenter. And so looking at that was being able to say, okay, this is a good communicator. This person's going to have good presence on stage. And then feeling very moved. I feel like that's when I think, yep, it's going to go viral. The other half of it is the algorithm and what it wants to do.
And why did it take 6 months? What triggered its virality?
Nothing. And that's the thing that people really need to know. And it happens for New York Times bestselling authors all the time. Like, things just sit there and then they have a mind of their own.
And they just blow up.
Yeah.
So there is a certain amount of luck to it, isn't there? I
Yeah.
imagine you've probably have produced or written and produced some really great TEDx's that did nothing, that are still just laying dormant out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of clients who come in and they're like, "Should I do 3 of these with you guys?" Because they kind of think about books, and like authors have 3 or 4 books and it's like one always takes off when they're like at the top of their game. So, I've definitely been asked about that. Like, "Is this a numbers game?" And I'm like, "Well, if you can afford to do multiple, why wouldn't you? It's a superpower personal brand move." But of course, not everybody's going to go viral.
What do you charge for this service of helping them get booked and writing their presentation? And do you also coach them in the delivery?
Yeah, we have all sorts of different deliverables. We work in 3 different tiers, but the lowest tier, just booking and writing the TEDx, starts at 30K with us.
30,000.
Mhm.
And then it goes up from there, and the rest of it then is help coaching them and their presentation
Exactly.
skills and so forth. Yeah.
Exactly.
And you work with people all across the board. So, how much of that method that you learned from that Obama speechwriter is infused in what you do today? And how much have you evolved it in your own experience of what works on the TED stage? Because I got to believe that the TED stage is a little bit different than the White House stage.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I have interviewed some political speechwriters and I wasn't as impressed with their work. And it's not because political speechwriters aren't awesome, but I've had more success looking for poets, like very poetic people to work. And so that's a big difference between politics and the kind of storytelling we're doing and the mindset of that. You had another question though. You'd asked about the speech writing and politics. What was the other piece of it?
Oh, and it was the coaching. Do you
Yeah.
do one-on-one coaching with stage presence and delivery and that sort of thing?
Correct. That's one of the
Mm.
tiers. I think that's the second tier that we offer is like a whole speaking coaching experience. And I love that when people do that piece because they take those skills with them forever. Like the way they learn to present. And a lot of those clients come back and get their talks upgraded to be a keynote with us. And then they use those storytelling skills. And that's been really beautiful to witness what people do in their career when they take these TEDx's as a basis for just upping their game as a speaker as a whole and really use the brand of TEDx to establish themselves as a voice, as a speaker,
Mm-hmm.
as somebody with a story.
When you are getting them to tell stories within their presentation, do you teach them a framework that they can follow in the telling of that story? Set up problem resolution or, the hero's journey, heaven forbid. That's fairly complicated for people to get. But do you have a go-to?
We try to keep it as done for you as possible. So mostly the clients show up and the only commitment on their side to work with us is an intake form and 4 Zoom calls. And in those 4 Zoom calls, we pull everything we need out of them. If they're an author and they've written a book or there's someone that's been on podcasts, we ask them to send those to us to absorb their energy. But it's in those 4 Zoom calls and in their intake form, we take everything from there to turn it into a talk. So we don't spend as much time teaching them how to write a talk as much as we spend our time focused on deeply understanding who they are and how to share their genius. through a short talk like a TEDx.
Then they've got to take your script and memorize it, it sounds like. Make
Yeah.
it their own, I suppose, in their own words. They're not going to probably follow every single sentence as you've written, but essentially you're giving them the TEDx talk. They've got to memorize and then present.
Correct, correct. And once you get booked for a TEDx, you usually have 3 or 4 months out from when the event is actually happening. So it's more than enough time for them to memorize a speech. And the memorization piece, I think, is really important. Like if you've ever been to a play like Hamilton and paid a lot for a ticket on Broadway, we know that a ticket we pay for on a Thursday is going to be just as good as a ticket you buy on a Friday because there's consistency. And
Mm-hmm.
speakers can't provide consistency and excellence if they're flowing and channeling on stage. They need to be excellent. And half of the game is knowing what you're going to say, the other half is really the improv piece of it, really acting and showing the enthusiasm and providing a performance for everybody listening. The world's top speakers on the speaking circuit have their keynotes largely memorized. And true professionals have so many pieces of content memorized that they can actually just create something out of thin air on stage because their brain is indexing so many different chunks of talks that they can pull in. But to be a pro, I think you need to memorize. And that's why we are really hesitant to encourage anyone to write too long of a TEDx speech because it's a lot to memorize.
Well, yeah, when I was doing mine, I opted for the 9-minute speech,
Yep.
and there was 5 of us going on stage, and I wrote it and I loved it. And then they came back to me and they said, "You're the only one here with speaking credentials. You've been there before. We want you to anchor it at the end, and we want yours 18 minutes." And I got to tell you what, Ashley, that 18-minute speech was a lot harder to do, not to memorize it, but to keep it going, keep it flowing, keep it interesting at all these different points. And especially in this day and age of our attention economy, it's like, boy, that's a heavy lift. And so
Yeah.
it took me several times to write it and rewrite it and rewrite it. And then, of course, rehearse it. So I had it down. How long do you recommend your customers rehearse their speeches so that they're really ingrained?
Yeah. I mean, for reference, a 9-minute talk is 3 pages times New Roman 12 single space. So we try to keep them 9 to 12 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
3 to 4 pages. I would say spend a week per page, like every day for a week, a couple hours a day, just recite the page out loud, like pretend there's an audience, say it out loud, paragraph by paragraph, till you have it memorized. And then when you work on the second page, you want to rehearse this. You want to start with the first page and then add a paragraph. The first page you've already memorized, and then add a paragraph of the new page, and keep doing that until you can keep adding. So it's a repetition experience.
Yeah, something I tried, and I don't know if it worked or not, quite honestly. I mean, felt fine when I finally did my presentation, is I recorded it and made a little audio file. And when I would go on my hikes, I would plug it in and I
Yep.
would listen to it. In some cases, I would recite it as I go. Other cases, I would ignore it altogether and just hope that my subconscious was picking up on it. And that
Yeah.
seemed to help me too, because I would get really bored rehearsing it over and over again. And you know
Yeah.
what? When it gets right down to it, that rehearsal phase of it can be very stressful because
Yeah.
you're there trying to ingest this and think about it and remember it. And then when you start botching it, in the privacy and quiet and safety of your own home, you get frustrated. And then
Yeah.
you self-doubt creeps in. And then you're wondering, God, can I really pull this thing off?
Yep. 100%. It's a very good line of thought and a very common one.
Yeah. What makes a TEDx completely bomb?
I think no matter what we write, no matter where you get booked, if you haven't practiced, it's not going to go well. And I just think like people save it to the last minute. And it's like one of the most, look, I've written 700 almost blog posts for Forbes, and none of them have influenced my career, even almost like one of the opportunities that have come from my TEDx. So when I think about the amount of time I've poured into all 700 blog posts I wrote for Forbes versus a 12-minute talk that really absorbed me for a couple of months, it's just a no brainer. So I would say practice. Also, like having low energy. A lot of people are scared when they get on stage. So sometimes they'll put their arms a little close to their hips instead of like, spreading their arms out, letting themselves take up space on the stage. They speak too fast and people can't process what they're saying. They don't pause enough. That's something that Obama did really well, pausing. And they have to remember information that is not new for them is brand new for somebody else, and being able to put those pauses in to help people understand it. And if people don't understand what you're saying, they're going to stop listening because it's hard on the brain and it becomes cognitive overload.
Yeah, all good points. Well, thank you, Ashley, for being here. This has been absolutely fascinating for me, having been through it myself several years, 5, 6 years ago now, and hearing how you all are approaching it. It sounds like you're having great impacts in people's lives, and that's why you call the TEDx talk the superhighway to success, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I really believe in it, and nothing has influenced my brand quite like it.
Yeah. Do you have an offer? I think you've got an offer here for our listeners.
Yeah. Anyone who lets me know you found me through Business of Story, be sure to let me know it's from here. We want to give you $1,000 off to do it within 2 months of this episode airing. So as long as it's within 2 months of the episode airing, you let me know you're from Business of Story. All you have to do is head on over to ashleystahl.com/TEDx. And we would be so excited when you apply. You let us know you're from here to give you that promotion.
Oh, well, that's awesome. We'll put that link in the show notes as well. So thank you so much, Ashley. I'm glad the cable guy came and got you fixed up so that we could have our talk here today. That was great. And enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Park.
Thanks for listening and sharing this edition of The Business of Story. If I can help you and your people grow as more confident and compelling storytellers, please shoot me a note to park@businessofstory.com. Or you can start right now with our ABTs of Agile Communications micro training course at businessofstory.com/ABT. Listen, too, if you really want to give me a hand, please jump over to iTunes and leave a rating and review for our show. It certainly helps us get found in the awful noise of the interwebs. I'd like to thank Caden Howell for editing our show, Darius Holbert for composing our music, and to Marissa Hill for her remarkable marketing and community management. Please join me next Monday when we will have another amazing story artist right here for you to help you craft and tell compelling stories that sell. And until then, as you are growing as a more confident and clear communicator, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one a great one. Thanks so much for listening.